What is addiction? Addiction is one of the oldest things that has ailed mankind. It is whereby a person is consumed either by a habit or a particular, shall we say, drug of choice, whereby so much that their lives are taken over emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, and physically, completely by this drug, by the ways and means to get this drug. And imagine even socially and spiritually, because it gets to a point whereby a person is not able to think about God, or even they start praying to God about getting high the next day. Now, addiction has taken very many different forms over the centuries. But the earliest written record of addictions, it's in the Bibles and most of the holy texts that are found around the world. You'll find each and every one of them condemning the use of drugs and alcohol at every particular turn. When we think about addictions has a progression as a disease. It affects each and every part of those things that I said, physically, psychologically, spiritually, socially, as a disease. So we cannot call it a moral issue. It is not amoral. It is just a disease. What causes addictions? Firstly, when we look at these two things, there is nature and there is nurture. And we're going to look at nurture first before we look at nature. Nurture is whereby when we start from the childhood phase, we talk about adverse childhood experiences. This person, did they go through any traumatic episodes? Did they go through any issues about attachment? How did they bond with their parents when they were growing up? So there's a lot of things that can happen during the nurturing phase of a person. Did they grow up in an environment whereby drinking and using of drugs and alcohol or any addictive pattern of behavior, was it normalized for them? And then there's a part about nature. In nature, we can look at it in two parts. Addiction can be passed on from one generation to another through our genetic coding. There's a second part whereby mental health issues such as depression, schizophrenia, all these diseases which are found in the mental health spectrum are passed on genetically to the next generation. And here's why they're important. Most people do not know that they have mental health issues, but they feel some disease. They feel that there's something wrong happening with them. So they look for some relief. And the easiest relief, or the most accessible relief, is a drug that is nearby. By the way, alcohol is a drug. So wherever you may be using it, think about it. You're feeling stressed. Stress is a mental health condition. You take that drink. You feel relief. That is what we call relief using. And this is what happens with most people who are having some mental health issues coming up. Third thing that can happen, which is not part of nurture, is these things that happen along as a person grows. So for example, postpartum depression, there is trauma, also what we call injury, very, very bad injury. We know very many people who got addicted to opiates because at one time or another, they had a broken spine, broken leg, and they got addicted to the painkillers that they were given. The causes of addictions can sometimes not be pinpointed directly. It is only after the fact that we can know. We can also look at our previous generations and see, did we have people who have mental health issues? Did we have people who have addictions? Do we have people who have issues with coping with life? Therefore, we can make a decision, is it safe for me to use a drug? Again, it is a choice at that particular point when you're starting out. And that is why it is very important for us to bring this information to our children as early as possible so that they can understand, I am making a choice that will affect me for the rest of my life. So there are types of addictions, and I'm going to refer because they're quite myriad, as you shall see. Now, there is what we call an addictions tree. An addictions tree means that as a tree grows, it has roots. So the roots of addictions are merely usually the same when you're talking about trauma, shame, and guilt. These are things that we talked about that are the causes of addictions. Now, as you go up, addictions grow out into 5 branches. And that is what we know as drug and substance addictions. There is also what we call activity or conduct addictions. There is thought addictions, there is feelings addictions, and there are people addictions. Now, for most of us, as we know, the people addictions are those that a person is addicted to having issues to do with love and sex. They're those people who are addicted to being in relationships. These are the people that are addicted to being in power. These are the people that are having issues with even letting go of groups of people. These are the people that get stuck in gangs, and you're wondering what is happening here. So because it's a whole way of life. But remember, when you're thinking about addictions, you're thinking about a way of life. This person has made it more than a career. So as you move on forward, we look at the activity or conduct addictions, and you're looking at gambling, you're looking at shopping, you're looking at the gym, you're looking at extreme sports, you're looking at sex. Those are what we call conduct addictions. And there is a prevalent group that is growing amongst the youth right now, other than gambling, is those that are stuck behind the computer playing computer games. These persons actually are the third largest growing, shall we say, people having issues with addictions. Now, we move on forward to people with thought addictions, and we're thinking about a lot of things. Ideally, the person would think that this person has repetitive thoughts or things like that. No, it's much more simpler than that. It's people who are having issues with religious thoughts or ideologies, and they're actually addicted to being in a certain cult. These are people who are addicted to being in a state of guilt, in a state of shame. Lastly, we were looking at the feelings addictions, and these are the people who just want to stay feeling a certain feeling the whole time. You want to feel in love. And those of us that also try to bring about the same emotions from other activities. For those of us who love watching extreme or violent movies, we try to get that feeling and try to replicate it again and again and again. You find that this person also gets into dangerous activity to bring about these feelings. And that is what we can look at as the 5 groups of addictions. What are the signs or symptoms of addictions? And what are the stages? We can't talk about one without leaving out the other. The first stage is experimental use. Experimental use is whereby the person or persons engage in drug use for experimental purposes. For example, finding out why the adults look so happy after taking a drink, or I've heard about marijuana. Does it make somebody mellow? Such questions that a person may have will get them thinking about, can we try this out? So you find most people in the experimental stages are actually teenagers, or actually even preteens nowadays. It depends on access. The next stage is regular use. Regular use is whereby a person is looking at every holiday, once a month, every payday. And this particular stage is where most people call the social use stage. When people are having a party, there must be some alcohol. I know it's a Kenyan thing that we must have alcohol at every occasion, be it a funeral, and there are people who can exist doing that very, very safely. They'll only drink, and they'll only drink to a certain amount, 3 or 4 bottles or 6, 7 shots of whiskey or something along those lines, and they're able to go home very comfortably and just deal with the hangover in the morning, if there is one. But now, when you're talking about an addict, you're talking about a person who does not have control. And we'll talk about him later on. The next stage is where you call it habitual use. Habitual use or instrumental use, they can be one or the same stage, depending on people who have broken them down up to 7 stages, is whereby the person now starts to use a drug or the substance or the activity to start answering some of life's questions. Why am I angry? Can I deal with my anger by drinking? I am bored. Can I smoke something? I'm feeling like this. Let me use this. Something has happened traumatic to me. Can I use this? So it becomes instrumental use or also habitual use. Every time I get money, I should get high. Every time I'm feeling this way, I use this. So this person is actually on the realm of what you call abuse. They're using the drug of choice in a way that it was not intended for. And I'm very, very categorical with that, because this is a part where you'll even find people using prescription medication for intentions that were not there. Very common in Kenya is people using Piriton to sleep. Piriton is an antihistamine. It is supposed to take care of hay fever and many other allergies, but you'll find parents giving it to their kids to help them sleep. Or even us adults have shifted to that thought, whereby we will use this medication to sleep. You'll find some of us starting to drink cough syrup even when we're having other normal issues. Now, after this stage is whereby if the person is not able to get enough relief during this stage, they move on to the next one, which is addiction. Addiction is whereby now they need to use this drug of choice or substance of choice or activity of choice exclusively to deal with life's issues, to deal with their body issues. That is, for example, they started to show withdrawals, they started to show cravings, they have started to show tolerance. Tolerance is whereby if you started out the beginning of the year, you were drinking 3 to 4 beers to get a certain effect. But at the end of that year, you need more to get the same effect. That's why it is troublesome. You have become an addict. If you take 1 stick of marijuana and you're very okay at the beginning of the year, but to get the same effect, next year you need 3 sticks. You have what we call tolerance. Your body has now become used to the drug of choice, and you actually need more to get the same effect. There is what we call reverse tolerance. Reverse tolerance is whereby your body is so damaged, and this happens in the later stages of addiction. You need very little drug of choice, that is very little alcohol, very little, be it heroin or cocaine or whatever, to get high, because your liver is packing up. Your liver is shutting up shop. Other body organs are shutting down. So you're not able to synthesize the amount of drugs in your system. So when you use a little amount, you get very high very fast. Cravings are whereby you feel a physical and a psychological urge to go and use a particular thing. I know some of us wake up in the morning needing some coffee, and that craving drives us to the kitchen to cook that coffee or to brew that coffee. Depends on which country you come from and your English. So imagine you wake up, and because that urge is so strong, you're actually shaking. You're actually physically acting out on that craving. Your leg is tapping. You have become irritable. You have become moody. That is how strong addiction's cravings are. And you move on to what we call withdrawals. Withdrawals are whereby you have of 2 kinds. There's a psychological and the other physical. Physically meaning that your body has become so used to that drug of choice or to the activity of choice that you need it to function normally. For example, because you're not eating that much as an alcoholic, your body now needs sustenance from the alcohol, which is just fermented sugar. So it will need that sugar to function. So the first thing, when you're having your shakes and you drink 2 shots and you're okay. After that, you can start functioning normally. That's even when you can start thinking about taking breakfast. Psychological withdrawals are such that you need certain chemicals to be put in your system so that you can start functioning normally here, can start thinking normally. You need that cigarette so that you can deal with whatever is being brought by your boss. You need that cigarette to think about thinking. You need that cigarette to think about how good that meal was. You need that cigarette to think about how you're going to do normal body functions like going to the washroom. That is where you get psychological withdrawal or psychological cravings. So if you do not have that cigarette, you start getting confusion, anger. You're not able, basically, not function normally as you should be. But remember that we were created with intelligent design. We are able to do these things without the functions of drugs and alcohol added onto our systems unless we are psychologically ill. What should you do once you start recognizing signs and symptoms at any of those stages that I described? If in the first two stages you recognize any signs and symptoms, it is very easy for you to quit on your own with very minimal help from the outside. But once you start getting to the instrumental phase and also to the addictions phase, you will need professional help, not only to deal with the withdrawals, but also you will also need a lot of psychotherapy that will help you deal with life's issues. Again, remember the addictions tree. They all grow out of something. And if we do not deal with the roots of the tree, if we do not uproot the roots, the addiction shall continue to grow. If the addiction continues to grow, remember it has 5 branches. You might cut off the addiction side of drug addictions and the person branches out to food. You cut off the branch of food, the person moves out to sex. So it's so on and on and on. So the best treatment for addictions is dealing with it using all the tools that we have. Remember, we used to have a saying that to bring up a person to become holistic, we need the whole village. So this village that we need to help us with addictions are psychotherapists, that's the counselors, a psychologist, counseling psychologists, and psychiatrists. We also need your clergy. That must be your imam or your priests or your pastors. You also need nurses, doctors. You'll also need their community, the addictions, people who have issues that they have gotten over. For example, people in recovery. That's the biggest treatment tool of any treatment facility, is the togetherness of the people that are in recovery. They teach each other quite a lot of things and they get each other over very many things. Much easier than even talk therapy can. By a lot of mentorship and such things. So it is very easy for you to get over the first 2 stages of addictions before they progress on into the instrumental and the addictive stage. How do you diagnose addictions? For diagnosis, it is usually done by professionals. But for those of us who are lay people, or you want to ask yourself several questions, there are a few things that you can look at. Number 1, we had talked earlier about tolerance. Tolerance meaning, do I need more of this substance or of this activity to achieve the same effect over time? And this time is measurable over 1 year. Secondly, have I started to get what we call psychological and physical dependence? Do I psychologically need to do this activity or to use this drug so that I can get that relief? Do I have physical dependence whereby if I do not do this activity or if I do not do the drug of choice, what will happen with me? Will I start getting withdrawals? Will I start to get cravings? Those are other things to look at. Thirdly and fourthly, that you need to also look at is, remember, this is more than a career. Addictions are more than a career. They take over your whole life. So you need to also start looking at the damages. Are you having legal issues? Are you starting to have social issues? Are you starting to have career problems? Are you having educational problems? Are you having problems with just living with society on life's terms? Those are the things that you need to look at on a personal level for you to see that you may have a problem. And lastly, and the most important, is what we call denial. Now, that is usually seen by the family of the addict or by a professional. And denial is a mechanism for the disease to protect itself so that it can continue flourishing. So it lies to the user that you're okay. It lies to the user, your problem is not so bad. The other people's problem is much bigger than yours. This protects the disease and allows it to flourish. So you can find that this person is stuck in a cycle of using, and they're not seeing that they're in trouble until what we call a window of opportunity. Something happens. They get arrested, get into a car accident, you lose all your money, you start losing your job. And at that particular point is where it is sometimes easier to approach this person and ask him, hey, my friend, don't you think you may be having a problem? Or you find that the person, every morning they wake up, they have that question of, hey, there's something going wrong here. With our loved ones, how do we see signs and symptoms of things to come? That is, addictions that are growing. Unfortunately, for most of us, we find that it's too late. The person that we love or the person that we are with is already in trouble, and lots of trouble. So the signs and symptoms that we need to look out for is, number one, social exclusion. The person starts to withdraw from society. And that's the biggest sign. Person starts to withdraw from society. That's a big alarming sign on its own. Not just for addictions, just for mental health generally. Remember that addictions is a mental health issue. So even the person's brain and thought patterns start to change. They start shifting from how they were relating with you on the normal, and they start coming back to become more selfish, more self-centered, more money-oriented, and keeping away from people all the time. Secondly is also their physical appearance. Are they eating? Are they not eating? Are they brushing their teeth? Are they dressing in clothes? Are they dressing in too much clothes or too underdressed? Also, how are they handling their emotions? Are they angry all the time? Are they sad? Are they able to manage all that? What time are they sleeping? Going back to the physical again. What time are they waking up? Are they able to do their social responsibilities? Are they still good fathers and mothers? Are they still able to go to school? Are they fulfilling all the roles that they're supposed to do? So if you look back at most addicts and alcoholics, they will tell you there was a gradual way they started letting go of their responsibilities in their lives. Gradually, they can even tell you, at a particular time, I lost my job. At a particular time, I stopped eating properly. I started taking 1 meal per day. At a particular time, I started stealing. At a particular time, I sold my own clothes. There is a progression. So you can arrest this quite early if you notice something going wrong. So it's asking each one of us to get out of our shells. And I thank God sometimes that COVID happened, because it got people around each other more, and we started noticing a lot of things around ourselves, and we noticed that the mental health burden that the world has is quite big, addictions being one of them, and the problems came home with us during COVID. So right now we can see the issues as they are. We are more connected, but the connection needs to become more than through our phones. It has to be physically. We have to be in each other's lives, not in each other's business, but in each other's lives, so that we can be able to help each other in the best way that we can.